It started in a small town in Greensboro, North Carolina. 4 black men, Ezell Blair Jr., David Richmond, Franklin McCain, and Joseph McNeil, attended the North Carolina Agricultural and Technological College and witnessed firsthand segregation in their town. One of the men, Joseph McNeil, was denied service at a Greyhound bus station in Greensboro because of the color of his skin. The 1955 murder of Emmett Till also sparked their wish for change. They decided that enough was enough. The 4 men met in a dorm room to discuss ways they can make a change. With the inspiration from people like Gandhi, the 4 men planned a non-violent protest. With the help of a white man named Ralph Johns, their plan would be achieved.
On February 1st, 1960, Blair, Richmond, McCain, and McNeil showed up at the Woolworth 5 and Dime store. They sat at the segregated lunch counter where African Americans were not allowed to sit. A worker at the store named Clarence Herons asked the men to leave, but they refused. Instead, they ordered coffee and waited for service, which they would never receive.
Getting the coffee was not their main goal. Instead, they wanted to raise awareness of the unfair segregation policies in the United States. Ralph Jones notified a news person of the event so the 4 men could get publicity. The police could not be called because the men were not being violent. Blair, Richmond, McCain, and McNeil stayed at the lunch counter the entire day. The following day, about 30 men and women joined in on the Greensboro sit-in at Woolworth. On February 5th, more than 300 students had joined the protests at Woolworth, and by the end of February, over 30 cities and 7 states were successfully engaged in the sit-in campaigns.
People were inspired by these 4 courageous men. These nonviolent protests were televised and spread rapidly throughout stores, beaches, libraries, and hotels in the United States. The television coverage they got helped to spread the idea of fighting segregation peacefully across the country and into 55 cities and 13 states.
The effect of their actions was tremendous. The sit-in forced Woolworths and other establishments to change their segregation policies. On July 26, 1960, every Woolworth in the country was desegregated, allowing for both whites and blacks to be served at the counters. The sit-in movement not only caused policies to be implemented, but also organizations to be established. An organization called the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which became one of the leading organizations for the civil rights movement, was established.
The 4 men all turned out to be key figures in the fight for equality of all people. Ezell Blair Jr. joined the New England Islamic Center and works with people with disabilities in AFL/CIO Trade Council in Boston, Massachusetts, to bring equality and justice to the world. David Richmond stayed in Greensboro and was awarded the Levi Coffin Award by the Greensboro Chamber of Commerce for leadership in human rights, human relations, and human resources development in Greensboro. Franklin McCain stayed in Greensboro and joined many boards to fight for equality. Joseph McNeil eventually joined the Air Force and implemented diversity programs to change the institution.
People with physical and mental disabilities have been discriminated against for years. Before the 1970s, people with disabilities were not offered or granted jobs. People with disabilities were seen as not capable to hold jobs or to do them efficiently or correctly. This is partly because getting an education was very hard for people with disabilities. Schools were not prepared and fully educated on how to take care of those students with disabilities. Many employers were also hesitant to hire these people because they didn't want to pay for the accommodations that were needed.
In 1973, an act was passed to help people with disabilities obtain jobs. The Rehabilitation Act of 1973 was created to stop employment discrimination against those with disabilities, and it also states that they must have an equal opportunity for promotions. The Act also includes rules and regulations for transportation, telecommunications, and government services accommodations. Even though the Act did help the disabled get jobs, people with disabilities are still under a ton of discrimination today. It is still hard for those citizens to land jobs or get promoted or even get paid fairly.
Currently, people with disabilities are being paid less than everyone else in the workforce. Washington State employs 932 people who work for sub-minimum wage. Polly Maxwell, Artisan's executive director, said she thinks a lot of her clients will lose their employment if sub-minimum wage is eliminated. Artisans is a job placement organization for people with disabilities.
The discrimination goes farther than just pay. People with disabilities are also harassed and made fun of on the daily. Many people use the R word to insult or make fun of people with disabilities. People often mock and make fun of the disabled as well by making insulting videos or disgusting comments and motions towards those people.
The Act of 1973 does not stop the disabled from getting harassed. Yes, it gives them jobs and an equal opportunity for promotions, but it doesn't protect them from the cruel world that we live in today.
The Greensboro sit-in and the discrimination against people of color has a lot of similarities to the discrimination against people with disabilities. Many people believed that people of color and people with disabilities were not capable to do normal day tasks, including obtaining a job. In reality, both people with disabilities and people of color are equally as capable as the average white folk. Because of how they appear to the outside world, both these groups of minorities are harassed and left out of all the opportunities that the United States has to offer. Both of these minority groups are still being harassed today, despite the acts that have been put into place. Today, there are still those stereotypes against people of color and people with disabilities. There is no need to be stereotypical against these groups. The United States is still stuck in the 1960s and needs to mature and realize that people of color and people with disabilities are the exact same as us.